Welcome to the Got Trauma Podcast with your hosts, Courtney K. and Monica Newland.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Got Trauma Podcast. Good morning, ladies. How are you? Good morning, good afternoon.
Yeah, I was going to say it's not morning, Monica.
No, we're a little bit later. It is for you though, right?
Yes.
Awesome. Well, we are back today doing the series that we have started, which is called the Chronicles of Childhood Trauma. And we are highlighting B, a woman of faith. She is joining us again. This is episode 2 of the series. So we're super excited about that. I wanted to just do a little bit of an introduction to you. B is a survivor, thriver, an overcomer on her journey to healing and sharing her story. She is an author and writer and has had several articles published over the years. I know in the last episode, I did include your social media handles so that people can follow you as well. I included your TikTok, so we'll again share your contact information so people can follow you. But thank you so much for joining. Episode 2, like I said, we are doing what we think like there's going to be probably 5 or 6 episodes, probably at least of this series.
Yippers. I think so.
Yeah. So let's circle back just a little bit. When in the last episode you talked about your early childhood and some of the first memories that you had. And of course, there were some heavy stories that you shared with us. Is there anything, or maybe you can sort of bring us back to that time and do a little recap of what that was. And then I know you are going to take us to what life was like as you were, getting a little bit older in your childhood.
Absolutely. So we did touch on the first episode of being abused at the hands of my father, my uncle, and party guests, which were the people, strangers and not so strangers, coming into the home and being passed around like I'm some sort of party favor. And I realized that there was a huge part of me that shut down to protect my mother. And that came to me last night because my mother was also an abuser. Now, given her past history, she had a childhood that was rife with abuse and violence. So that had a huge hand in shaping her to be malleable and easily manipulated and controlled by my biological father to perpetuate a lot of the abuses that came from her too. The other strange twist to that I also had to I guess bring to the forefront, I did a lot of digging last night, was not only was she an abuser, but she was also a protector in the home. So there were times when she was fully aware that my dad was volatile and ready to explode, and she would try and hide my sibling and I from him. Under the couch, behind the couch, under the bed, and act like we had gone to the neighbors.
Oh, wow.
And I know that she was abusive because of her childhood programming, but she was abusive because of the repercussions of not listening to the orders given to her by my dad, if that makes sense. I do say that, and there were also women at these parties that were abusers. So I would say that my childhood was, I was abused by men and women in my childhood. For my mother, the huge change and transition for her and I in mending and healing through that was, one, my foster parents made it clear that they were not going to shut the door on my mother. They actually gave her a lot more leeway to come and visit and spend time with us and receive healing herself.
Oh, really?
And, yes, which I think was super important for my mom and for my sister and I.
Absolutely.
But my mother also went through a lot of counseling and therapy. But it was interesting because when she divorced my dad and he was court ordered away from the family, no contact, by legal paperwork, legal standards, it was like night and day for her. She went
Yeah.
from being an abuser and an aggressor and a protector to struggling and fighting to be a good mom.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was something that was a huge step in our healing journey. And it took her many years to get to that point where I was really able to embrace that title mom with her.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't until adulthood that she became more of a mom to me than my growing up years.
Right.
But again, people saw that need there and realized that this isn't who she is, and she needed help too.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you that, B. I was very curious because I know that in conversation we've talked that you and your mother had a good relationship before the end of her life.
Yeah.
And I'm just curious how, were you able to confront her about certain things that happened to you? And did she validate those things, or was that never a conversation to be had?
So one thing about my mother's mental health, there was a lot of stuff. Like I know that one, I was dealing with somebody who was stunted in their intellectual growth and their emotional growth. So communication with her was very, very difficult for me. A lot of that had to do with her childhood, kind of locking her into that victim mentality and keeping her there, but also because of I guess genetics or whatever, that they would classify her as being mildly retarded.
Oh,
So,
really?
yeah, so some things just, it was not possible to talk to her about a lot of that stuff.
Okay.
But I think the key integral part between our communication was me being very repetitive in correcting her behaviors towards me, I guess. To kind of go, Mom, I don't like you speaking to me that way. That hurts my feelings. Mom, I mean, you're stuck in this role over here, and you're doing the woe is me, and I can't be around that because it's not healthy for me. But she also had all that therapy behind her that made a huge difference. And she got to a point where instead of everything being centered around her, she was actually giving me that time to hear me, and I could share stuff with her.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah, it was.
I mean, that's a fantastic, you know, I guess what am I I have a few things that are going through my head because I think that that's so fantastic that you were able to get to that point. And I think, you said that one of the ways you were able to do that is you were very consistent in how you were dealing with that interaction and your boundaries. And that's so important because, when you're trying to sort through what this, say new relationship is like now, that's, you're open to it, but yeah, having, being consistent, knowing exactly where your boundaries are and communicating that consistently, that's a really good tip and good point.
Yeah.
Because you were able to get, like, it was great that you were able to get to a point where there was that mutual understanding and respect, where I'm sure at one point in your life, you didn't think you weren't going to get there.
No, at one point I actually went no contact with her completely. And that more or less started because part of the control and manipulation that she put me through for several years, even when I was in foster care into my early adulthood, was her suicide attempts. And those suicide attempts were blamed on me. You're the one who did this to me. I can't believe you did this to me. You don't love me. I'm not good enough for you. And I said this, and I know that this is going to be a shocker for a lot of people, but the last attempt she made on her life was the last attempt she made on her life. And this was the pivotal point for her. When she called me from the hospital, doing the whole barrage of, this is my fault, and she doesn't have a relationship with me and she's so heartbroken. That control and manipulation of my emotions, being on the pity pot. I actually said to her, I'm done with this. And next time you better be successful, because I'm not going to put up with this shit from you anymore. I'm not the one to blame. You're the one choosing to do this to yourself.
Yeah.
And I will not have you put that on me.
Yeah.
That's you.
Yeah.
And it literally was the last suicide attempt that she made, because she realized she couldn't get to me anymore that way. Because I would drop everything and run, right?
Yeah. Well, that's just it in those situations too. Like, how long do you carry on that? I don't want to call it a farce, but
Right.
you know, like, how long do you carry that on for, that you keep condoning the behavior that's, you know, disrupts your life?
Yes.
And, you know, like, how do you draw that line in an empathetic way? You know, like, sometimes you have to kind of crack the whip and be a little harsh about it. And like, it's time to wake up, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I love my mom. It's not anything that I would want her to do to herself, but
Of course.
I was at that breaking point where, like, you can't control and manipulate me like this anymore.
Yeah.
And because I was feeding into it and reacting to it the way that was edifying and suiting her needs and demands, I had to put my foot down and go, no, this isn't going to happen anymore. You cannot control and manipulate me. And I'm not going to enable you to do that.
Yeah, exactly.
Because my reactions were enabling her to continue down that road with that repeat cycle of, well, you're the reason why I tried to kill myself because you don't love me, here for me.
Yeah.
Like, no.
Well, no, that's such a huge burden to put on somebody. And, you know, the fact that you were able to put your foot down like that and say, enough's enough. Like, that's huge. There are people that live in that for their entire lives.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, good for you for making that stance. And, you know, you made the right choice, obviously, because it was the end of that, you know, scenario, which is good. Yeah.
One thing I have to say about her is she loved to a fault. She gave so much of herself that if the shirt on her back was the last thing she owned and you were in need, she would give it to you. I do believe, once again, that was a lot of her trauma speaking because of her life and the things that she did without, and then the abuses she was subjected to, not just in her childhood, but in her marriages.
Right.
And with everything that she went through and all of her own healing journey, it really is what brought us closer together. I miss her to this day.
Yeah.
She's passed on now, obviously, but I miss her to this day. And I'm so thankful also that my foster parents saw that in her and recognized that in her and said, we are not going to keep you from your children. We just have to find a good way of keeping that connection going that's healthy.
Yeah. Healthy, safe.
Absolutely.
Yeah, safe, healthy, and not destructive.
Yeah. Well, that's great.
You don't, the stories are always so mixed, right? In situations like that. Because I mean, for a lot of the time, people have a hard time seeing any good, especially when, you know, children come out of situations like yours that are absolutely horrific. You automatically label those people as, you know, like, they're
defective,
what's the word?
Garbage.
Exactly. Yeah, I was trying to find a better word, but that's exactly, might as well just not mix words. That's exactly what it is. And not looking at, okay, well, what has your situation been like?
Yeah.
You know, where did you come from? Perhaps this is repetitive behavior due to your upbringing, right? How do you break the cycles as opposed to just throwing people to the side?
Yeah.
You know, there's so much about that when you're dealing with a child who is acting out, who is violent. That was me. In school, I was acting out. I was violent. I was out of control. At the same time, I was a terrified little girl who hid a lot. stole food, like I said in previously, stole food from fellow students to eat because I was starving. A lot of the teachers and staff focus on the behavior, but not the root of that behavior and where it's coming from. And if they do know a little bit of that family history, they are going to discriminate against you immediately, paint you with an ugly stick or the shit end of the stick.
Yep.
And just make the automatic assumption that you're just like everybody else in the home.
Right.
Well, I was just, yeah.
You don't stand a chance. You're damaged goods.
Yeah. You're the drugs kids.
And I know, B, we've had a little bit of like offline conversation about this, and I know I'm sure we'll touch base on this as as episodes continue. But I mean, you mentioned about your mom, and she had various degrees of difficulties in her own life from her own trauma, and then mental health, and then even you said past that, like in some medically, you said that she was disabled to some degree.
Yeah.
And the reason why I'm bringing that up is because that's where our systems, I feel like there's so much work that needs to be done in the systems, because she obviously was not provided with the resources, the support. She never, think back to when she was a child going through that, having this level of, disability. She got swept off her feet by your father and lived in this chaotic environment. And, she wasn't adequately prepared for these real life scenarios. Maybe she didn't have that support. Maybe she didn't have any of that. And that's where the systems, people like you spoke about your teacher in the last episode, where people, I know people are afraid to step in, and, in Canada, we have some systems in place. However, there's a lot of, like corruption and BS and bureaucracy that is behind a lot of this. And I guess, I'm just sort of ranting a little bit, because it's just sad, in my opinion, because the systems aren't in place to really support at those, that foundational level that perhaps would have changed the course of your mother's life. And then,
change the course of yours.
Yes, exactly.
And that's why we're doing this now, right? That's why we're having these conversations now, because there should be more awareness shed on things like help parents. Don't just shut them down and
label them
lock them in label jail and throw away the key. Like,
right,
exactly. Help them be better parents so that their kids can thrive.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we have the information.
Exactly. And I can go from it's funny, but I actually have the hard copies of my medical records from childhood. That just sort of happened accidentally. And I remember at one point I wanted to go through and just sort of see what doctors had to say about the broken bones and the infections and what were in the medical records. So if you can think about, my mother got pregnant and had her first child at 16, had me at 18, had my brother in her early 20s. What was available for her then, and how much of this stuff was, you don't talk about it.
Yeah.
It doesn't exist.
Yeah.
To now we're in my timeline, and I look back at the records and you're experiencing the exact same thing. Oh, she fell off the bed. That's how she broke her leg. She fell off the monkey gym at school. That's why she's covered head to toe in bruises. She went down a slide, and that's how she ended up with the massive gash on her buttocks that needed, that actually got infected and needed surgery to fix. God. And that was abuse and neglect, very blatant in the faces of these doctors.
Right.
And they chose to step away from it because it's not their problem. They did not want to be involved because of all the ramifications of involving themselves or documenting it. You might have to go to court, which probably would have happened because we ended up in court.
Interesting. I know. And I'm not like trying to throw the medical system, under the bus,
totally
but but it fucking sucks. Like I it's disappointing, I guess, and to hear that you not only knew, like, that basically continued on for so much of your life. And that's just
right up to the very
it's
present.
not right.
I was gonna say right up till now too, right? So
Yeah, right up to the very present. Unfortunately, they and it's not. I mean, I've had 3 phenomenal doctors in my whole life. One was my childhood doctor, and he was extremely attentive and very cautious, super kind, and he was a massive part of that healing process for me as well. And then when I got to Kelowna, there was a doctor there who came in at the height of one of my domestic situations and was there for pretty much the whole step of the way until he retired. And now I have this amazing doctor. So not all of them falter.
Yeah.
But there's a lot that will be like, I'm sorry. And I've had that happen. I'm sorry. I'm not going to deal with this. And leave the doctor's exam room and leave me sitting there going, excuse me, but I'm calling for help.
yeah.
So there's going to be the give and the take. There's going to be the winners and the losers in all of that.
Yeah.
Well, back to what you were saying about being labeled in school because of what you were experiencing. You were having outbursts, anger, those types of things. And like, obviously that affected you for a really long time until you found a teacher that gave a shit.
It's interesting because it did affect me in my early years, but it affected me all the way through school. And that's the other kick in the teeth. So being a troubled child who's being neglected, not fed properly, not bathed, and just like the general upkeep of a child was not there. As well as falling behind on my schoolwork because my parents did not have the intellectual capacity to work with me through that schoolwork, but at the same time, didn't give a shit and didn't want to put the time and energy into nurture their children. So being, I think the real tipping point, and I'm not concerned about sharing this. I think one of the other real tipping points was there was a crafty thing happening in the classroom, and I had a pair of scissors in my hand, those crazy little plastic thingies that are supposed to be super protective for kids to use. And I was cutting something, and I was working on my little project, and this one little boy came up, and he wanted my scissors, and we're supposed to share. Well, I didn't want to share. I wasn't done with what I was doing, and I actually lunged at him and almost took his eye out with a pair of scissors. That was how volatile I was as a child. Then I'm coming from a violent home. That was normal everyday occurrence. And of course, not only am I mimicking what I'm seeing within the family home as being normal behavior, I'm also raging inside because my whole world I don't understand my whole world because it's nothing but violence. And I didn't have any outlets to plug into to go, this is not normal.
Right.
To me, this is normal, but nothing for healing. So the blessing is that one teacher saw my silent screams for help, basically, because some of it wasn't silent, because I'm tantrums and rages and stealing food, and but as we progressed from that's what put me into foster care, was that one teacher who cared and listened and took the necessary steps to make those calls. I continued to be labeled all through school as damaged goods, an unruly child, a child who did not have potential, who did not have a future, because my parents were addicts, my parents were abusers. So obviously I'm going to be the same way. I'm going to become the same thing as they are. The labeling, the discrimination, the prejudgment. And why would that occur? Well, teachers talk, school records talk, So a lot of the stuff from those previous years were in my school records for other teachers to read. And I remember different situations that came up with those teachers, and I had to, when I was old enough, I actually had to go and seek help because I knew I was being discriminated against right in my classroom. And I ended up with at least 2 teachers who got suspended because of the way they treated me in the classroom.
Wow.
See, I could stand up against the adults at that point, but I wasn't able to stand up against my peers. And I was bullied relentlessly all through school.
That makes sense because I can actually attest to that. I had no problem saying what I thought to adults, but when it came to people of my own age, I was very intimidated.
Yeah.
I just let people walk all over me as far as that went. Because I mean, not being liked by your peers was worse than, pissing off an adult.
Yeah. For sure.
And I think that's where we're saying about with the medical industry and like the school system, this stuff is going into permanent records for other people to have access to. And when like we were discussing recently, I took myself to the hospital. I'm struggling and I need help. I'm going to go where I think I'm going to get that help. And I was immediately prejudged and discriminated against and labeled.
Yeah.
And it's not my first rodeo with that, but it doesn't take the sting out of it either.
Yeah.
Because I'm coming in with mental health issues, because I'm coming in with other garbage on my plate, I got dismissed without them actually taking the time to get to the root of the problem.
Yeah, I can 100% understand that. It was a year ago that I checked myself into the mental health ward at the hospital. And I luckily, through that horrendous experience over those couple of days, I managed to connect with a nurse who listened to me to find out more about my situation. And she happened to be a mom. So we were able to, sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. We know how raw and real we get, and that we get triggered. And
it's just, it's tough when you're trying to figure out your own shit to find somebody who will listen, like you're saying. And then we ended up, I thank God there happened to be a good doctor who was, kind of circled through over those couple of days. And he managed to listen to me. And I ended up finding out I had some health issues, which is what led me down the whole autoimmune train. But I, from there on out, was labeled as every single time I went to the hospital when I had issues with my health, which I was in my body was collapsing at times. It was really difficult. But I went in and the first thing they said was, I think this, it sounds like you have depression. It sounds like you have anxiety. And I remember like the last time I went in and I finally accepted the antidepressants. And I remember saying to him, like, well, no shit, I'm depressed. I have spent the last, year battling my health, battling, this on this healing journey, going in, trying to understand things. I'm re-traumatizing myself every single time we go into the hospital to go through all of this.
Right there, re-traumatizing.
Yeah, like it's very, and I know that this is their place of employment and they're used to this space and they have to be cold to a certain extent because they can't tie emotions to people. I understand all of that. But when somebody is pouring their heart out, you're trying to figure out what the hell's going on with them. It's horrible. It's horrible. And I'm so grateful to that one nurse who sat down, because I think I ended up just saying to her, like, I miss my kids. And she's like, oh, I know. And I have young kids. And yeah, it's hard.
Well, it is, especially for you because you're strong, right? So breaking like that is not easy. It's not easy to be like, I need help. Like this is, and then to be shit on for it. Like that's the part that makes me sad because how wrong that is.
Yeah.
Like you don't, Why do we want to just dump these fucking labels on everything? Why can't we just get to the root? Sorry, it takes a little while, but where's your fucking compassion?
Yeah. And she noticed that I was a little bit different than some of the other people in the psychiatric ward, because like some of them were, you know, like they were off their rockers and they needed to be helped in that area because they couldn't communicate and like all these other things. And then I'm sitting there being like terrified for my life and trying to find, you know, somebody who will listen. And my husband wasn't allowed. He was dismissed out, even though like he brought me there. And like it was, so it just brings me back to my point about how like your mother didn't have that, you know, and then you went into the systems and didn't have that support. Courtney, I know you've been, you know, through your own struggles with all of this. Like it fucking pisses me off. It's so unfair. It's not right. It's putting those labels on people. Like, who cares? Like, I don't care. You want to label me as somebody who has mental health problems? Go ahead. But that doesn't mean that, like,
you don't deserve help.
You don't. Yeah. Like, I don't get it. Like, so then you stop there. Like, you know, here they sent me home with pamphlets. Here's some printouts. And then they checked on me 24 hours after I got out. I'm like, 24 hours. Like, I'm sleeping. I haven't slept for 4 days. Like, I'm, you know, anyways, there's a lot of fucking bullshit. The system.
So you hit a very key point. It is re-traumatizing. It's re-traumatizing when you're going through school and having teachers, you know, bully and pick on you because of a history that you had no control over.
Yeah.
That are going to judge and label you as being the exact same way, when you just want to have a good childhood and you just want to, you know, heal and be loved and be normal.
Yeah.
And you're not ever seen as normal ever again, to, you know, dealing with the medical system and facing that same level of discrimination and prejudgment. And you're sitting there going, but I'm here because I know I need help. And then they say, it's all in your head.
Yeah.
When you yourself know it's not in your head.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we can all attest to the fact that trauma, suppressed memories, abuse of any form has a toll not just on the brain, but on the body. And 100%. That's where the autoimmune stuff comes from. Chronic pain comes from. Migraines. Yeah. You know, yes, you might have depression and grief and complex post-traumatic stress disorder or PTSD or whatever other mental illness. But where is all that coming from, and how is that affecting the body?
Yeah. And there's really no, like, there was nothing. Like, I didn't talk to anybody about it. I had a therapist who I ended up speaking to after about it and before about it. Like, I mean, it wasn't, I was aware that there was, you know, I was not in a good state, you know, and you, like, you know, you said, like, you know, you've recently even dealt with this. It's like, you know, I know I'm not in a good state. So, like, help me here. Like, you know, what are my options? Like, who's available? Like, what do we do? What do we do in this?
Yeah. And you're walking into a hospital knowing too, right? Knowing you're going to be looked at. Like, you're like, please, 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 can I just have the one? Can I just have the one that will listen?
Exactly.
Please.
And that's what I was hoping for by going in. This is a hospital I'm unfamiliar with. These are doctors and nurses I don't know. But as soon as the file came up, it was a complete change of tune. Yep. Oh, you must be on something. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
Well, just because my family struggles with active addiction doesn't mean that I do. You just pre-labeled me and prejudged me.
Oh,
and I usually get angry at this point and go ahead. You can do the piss test. You can do the blood test. You'll find nothing in my system. Do you really want to accuse me of this shit?
Yeah.
And I only ever had a nurse and a doctor come back and apologize to me once when I was actually in Alberta, saying, we're sorry. Like, but we kind of had to go down that road. And I said, I understand that, but you prejudged me.
Yeah.
You made an assumption because of past history shit that I'm
Yeah.
going to be fully loaded with narcotics and all this illegal substances, or that
Yeah.
I'm coming in, drunk. Well, of course you're going to smell that.
Yeah.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
obviously.
Shame on them. Shame on them. It's especially because, and I know we're really talking about this
Kind
a
of went
lot,
off,
but
kind of
like,
detoured.
yeah, I know,
Okay,
but we
but this
like,
is good because this is important.
yeah, this is real life shit. Like,
Yes.
this is what we're dealing with even years after. I mean, I am in a different area. There's none of that like family history on my records that I don't think my doctors have here. I don't know, maybe there is, I don't really know, but I mean, I don't have the same scenario as you, but it's just so frustrating. And for you to be like, you're like, I'm actually here. Like, don't you think that somebody who's off their, like on something wouldn't have the wherewithal to know that they need to go get help? Like, those people, like, it just doesn't make sense, right? But this is you. Well, you fit into this little, couple things. Like, you fit into this box. This is must be it. Let's change your medication, or let's offer you, this is all we have for you, or here's the pamphlet. Off you go. Like, and after you've been sitting also and waiting for like 10 to 15 hours because you're a low priority. Because I dealt with that so much too. It's like you're just sitting and waiting and like sitting in a chair and like, oh God, it's all horrible.
Like, have a therapist on hand.
There's
somebody,
psychiatrists. There are psychiatrists in the hospital. There's if you go in for mental health, the reason why I ended up going in and checking in for mental health is because I knew I'd be taken seriously.
Right.
And it was very serious. It was a very serious scenario. I didn't know what was going to transpire. They put you in like a fucking, like a white room where you sit and you have to think about yourself, like somebody who's coming in who is on drugs. Like, they sit, and there was another guy who was like in the room next to me, and he was like coming off something, and I was like put into that box. I was like, fuck. Yeah. I'm sorry you've been through and experienced similar situations, and it's just.
I think I'm sorry that any of us or any other abuse survivor, whether it's childhood abuse or domestic abuse and violence, has ever been through any of that, or anyone who hasn't been through any sort of abuse but deal with people in active addiction in their family units, whatever the case may be, that have ever gone in and been treated poorly, either in the school system or in the medical system, for something they themselves had no control over.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's the key part.
Yeah.
Things need to change in that department. Like, I'm not done, but and I know that this will resonate with a lot of you too, is we're tired, we're exhausted, and we have to fight to advocate for ourselves. We have to fight that much harder, dig that much deeper, while we're falling apart inside and outside, because our bodies are going to fight against whatever is happening, in here and in here.
Yeah.
And we're falling apart, and we have to dig that much deeper and fight through that exhaustion just to get one tiny glimmer of hope that you're going to have a test result come back and it's going to explain everything, or somebody's actually going to listen to you and go, oh, 2 and 2 together. Well, this is what's going on. We can either fix it, or we can help you through it, or we can help you manage it.
Yeah.
But don't just blame it on, because I have complex post-traumatic stress disorder, I'm a hypochondriac, or just because my family members have lived a certain lifestyle, that I too live that lifestyle. Friggin' the list goes on, and I'm just getting angrier at just thinking about it.
Well, it's like we talked about yesterday. You don't treat people with cancer like that.
No, you don't.
Somebody doesn't walk in and get diagnosed with cancer and then get sent home. Well, it's just prostate cancer, change your diet and live better and you'll be okay.
Yeah.
No, they don't have a choice. Well, neither do people with mental illness. Like, I mean, and I don't say that to be, I'm not trying to be ignorant to people with cancer. So please, like, nobody take it that way. I'm just putting it in the in perspective of how we feel on the inside, because we feel like we're dying. Physically,
Yeah.
you feel like you're dying.
Yeah.
And it is because you have been berated for years and years with all this mental and emotional abuse and physical abuse.
Mm-hmm.
And you're just meant to wear this as if it's, just a part of who you are.
Yeah.
And it's not a fucking part of who you are. It's something
Yeah.
that was, you were afflicted with. Why the fuck do I want to carry that around the rest of my life?
It's an
Yeah,
incurable cancer that doesn't kill you unless you decide to unalive yourself.
There. Yeah.
And just because you brought cancer into that, and because we were talking about what my mother went through, so her grandmother, my aunt, and her, the three of them were diagnosed with breast cancer. All three of them died of leukemia.
Really?
My mother kept going in to get help, knowing something was wrong. At the time, the breast cancer was not on the plate. It was not there. It was not. So she kept going in, something is wrong, something's not right? And her health was deteriorating. But then the breast cancer showed up. So now they're treating the breast cancer. She goes in, she has operation, they remove what they could, they send her home. In less than a week, she's back in the hospital. She's failing quite rapidly. And they test further and find out that she is in the late stages of leukemia.
Wow.
She had like 3 to 5 days to live. So that whole time that she's going in asking for help because something is wrong, she got dismissed, prejudged, ignored, sent home. It's all in your head, or you're just a little bit anemic. But they never got to the root of that problem.
Fuck,
and
that's
she
scary.
died of the leukemia.
It's scary. It's terrifying.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm not gonna harp on this, but I have lived in other countries, and there's something to be said about being able to go to a well-established hospital and pay for something. Like, obviously, I realize I'm grateful to be in Canada and to have free healthcare. However, is it free if it takes you 5 to 6 years to get the help? I'm not sure anymore. And I know that this episode has sort of taken a bit of a turn towards this, but we are talking about real life scenarios that are happening to more than just us on this call. Like, it is affecting so many people. And
It is.
my heart goes out to those people who are in the thick of it. I have managed to finally I ended up just taking my health into my own hands, because the last time that I was there, I went in by ambulance and they dismissed me and told me to take the antidepressants. And I just gave up, because I'm like, well, I know that there's something more to my situation than just, I'm like, give me the antidepressants. Sure. I don't care. That's not what the problem is here. And nobody's listening. And I ended up taking my health into my own hands, trying a lot of different things, which is why we're very open on our podcast to all these different modalities of healing, because you have to sort of try some things that work for yourself, and everyone's different. Everyone's healing journey is different. Everyone's trauma is different. I have finally managed to find something that has given me some relief. But it is a rocky roller coaster shit show of a ride. Like,
Yes,
I'm
it
sorry,
is.
just to be blatantly honest about it. But I mean, and I don't want to end here on a negative note, but there is things that we can do. And, hopefully, we're just opening up this dialogue for conversation about, some of the things that we've experienced. And it's not like a blanket statement. We are just simply talking about what our experiences have been in relation to what we know has happened in our lives, where we are well aware and self-aware of the things that we need to heal from. That doesn't change the fact that we don't need the help and the support. And so I started this, we started this podcast, but I started to share my story shortly after, a couple months after I got out of the hospital last year, because it was so life-changing, really, this whole scenario that I went through, that I'm like, I have to talk about what's going on, and I have to open up this dialogue about mental health, because I didn't come from this line of people. I mean, I did, but nobody knew about my line of my family history. And what I had actually been through. These doctors didn't know about my mom, my trauma, my abuse, whatever. I was, as soon as I told them that, like, oh, well, my mom was an addict, and they're like, boom. Yep. Now this all makes sense. Don't you just want some medication for it? My family doctor, the hospitals. Anyways,
Gross.
we could go on and on and on about
Gross.
this.
It's gross.
And I think that, I know you have so much to share. We
Sort of
said that we were going to
hijacked.
we sort of hijacked your story here. we're very comfortable talking with you. So it's like, opening up about all of this stuff.
Likewise, and don't dismiss the detour. A lot of these detours are necessary and happen for a reason. And we are touching on very key points in regards to our healing journeys and the things we've experienced from the school system and the medical system.
Yeah.
And the one other thing that I wanted to just touch on really quick in regards to that whole medical system thing, my last attempt to unalive myself was because I went for help and I got shut out. And I made it clear, you don't understand. I am suicidal right now. And if you make me leave, I will be coming back in a completely different capacity than me just walking and asking for help.
Oh my God.
And if you think about how much that happens where you're dismissed or you're tossed out or rejected or get out, we're done with you. There's nothing else we can do. How many of those people end up homeless on the streets, struggling with their mental health, or just simply killing themselves?
Mm-hmm.
Bluntly.
Yeah.
Suicide.
Yeah.
Because you get to that breaking point and there's no coming back.
No.
And because I've experienced that, and I know, and I'm thankful to be alive, to be honest with you, that it was an unsuccessful attempt, but that attempt was made because everything that led up to it was too much, and nobody was helping me. Nobody was hearing me.
Yeah. Well, again, that's why we are shedding light on these issues. Hopefully people, the right people who, will take the time to listen, know that they are not alone on this journey, that there are people who understand it as isolating and as shitty as it is. There are people who get it. We're all very active on social media, TikTok. We have a really great community there. That is how we met B, was on TikTok. And we've all, built this beautiful community of people who understand, who are looking for help, who are looking for support. We're uplifting, inspiring, motivating, keeping people, accountable and educated, and, just
being
sharing the journey. Yeah.
Being real.
Being real 100%. So thank you so much. Let's end this here. We've got lots more to talk about. Everybody, please tune in for episode 3. But thank you again for your candid and honest and raw conversations today, ladies.
Absolutely. Right back at you, Monica.
Yes. Love you guys.
All right. Yes, I love you. We'll see you in the next one.
You got it. Love and blessings, you guys.
See you in the next one.
You got it. Bye.
Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to hit those subscribe and share buttons. We'll see you at the next one.